You really went and done it this time, Mr. Brown. I get that Formula One's always been political, but what I've just seen with Zak? What happened, McLaren? This kind of posturing and theatrics I'd expect when going to a theatre. What seriously disappointed me this time is an interview the McLaren CEO undertook with TalkSport, in which he said the quiet part out loud about Formula One and politics. So here is what Zak said for your consideration, and don't worry, I'm not naive. F1 and politics have been like that ever since it began. It's everywhere in every single sport. But this just... hear for yourself. Ahem. In regards to politics, everywhere, because it depends on what it is. Drivers, teams, sponsors, employees. I mean, you're fighting hard, which I think is one of the things that Drive to Survive shows so well. In our sport, the competition off the field is as great as it is on the field, and it's very political. I'm not an expert in other sports, but we are trying to, in our sport, destabilise other teams. So we're not just trying to make our team as strong as possible. Andrea Stella, our team principal, calls it poison biscuits. They talk trash to each other, and that's all mental to try and kind of get in each other's heads, and we do that at every level. I think sport is filled with characters. Good guys, bad guys, all different. I think that's what makes the sport fascinating. Yeah, no, McLaren, again, you have lost me here. I know that, funnily enough, the former McLaren boss Ron Dennis coined the term famously the Piranha Club, as in the bunch of team principals who would basically eat your face off at the first opportunity if it would make their team go that little bit faster. Note the Eddie Jordan-Michael Schumacher saga of '91. I get that, but what I don't like is just the normalcy that Zak has portrayed here. Like, this is just commonplace, as in, what? Everyone's doing it, what's the problem? It's a choice, for sure, to say the quiet part out loud, and it really sort of completes the transformation of Zak Brown into the new Christian Horner. The difference here, though, is that Toto has a power unit contract with you, and he's looking to cut down customers. I mean, of course, Toto Wolff wouldn't resort to such underhanded tactics in the sport, yeah, right? Right? But then, you know, piranhas eating your face and all that jazz. But fear not, I've got more going here. I'm going to try and explain why Zak Brown is doing this, but it doesn't mean that I have to like it. If you don't mind it, that's your own prerogative. Don't worry about it. I'm just here to say why I'm not really a fan of this current McLaren and why I'm really considering my options, or maybe I've already had my options decided for me. Put what Brown said beside what the actual team principal Andrea Stella has said so many times, him watching years of politics and drama unfold over at Ferrari and being part of the beneficiaries of that Scuderia system, Fernando Alonso's racing engineer who went over to McLaren with him, Andrea's been very keen to avoid any of those facets of governance for his own team now he's had the chance to lead and come up with quite a lot of silverware. 3 trophies, 2 team titles and a driver's one now to add to his CV. And a short view back to the past, my friends, because Andrea was the one to coin, around this time last year, the term poison biscuits. Now already that sounds a little bit weird, but it does actually have a valid explanation and definition. It's a cultural vaccine. What he's trying to get at with poison biscuits is to start every single season like you lost the previous one, as in, don't carry any baggage from last year. That means you will not get poisoned or contaminated by what people say about you, because to you, you're just starting another season like this is your first ever season. Purge, purge, purge. Yes, of course, it's a bit of a defensive and inward-facing stance. It doesn't exactly sound strong, but it is actually quite a mature way of going about things. There is a trend going on in Formula One, and I think Andrea's really trying to follow it, but he's got the foghorn that is Zak, sort of undermining every single thing he says. But at the same time, and what really makes me appreciate Andrea's stance here is that he knows that not all champions, or in fact any champions are ever perfect. They do have their flaws and foibles and whatnot, because as McLaren have demonstrated the last 2 years where they've been contesting for championships, they have not been perfect at all. However, I just feel like with that term poison biscuits, Zak Brown has decided to take it, because he even mentioned it in his quote, and he's just missed the point. Those poison biscuits which have fallen within McLaren's lines and just been ignored, he's just picked up Zak these and just hauled them back out at other people. As you can imagine from the videos that you may have watched, including this one, I'm not a fan of that particular tactic. I just don't feel it's necessary, especially when you're a champion now. But hey, I'm not a team principal or a racing CEO. I'm just a fan of Formula One on top of a ladder. That's all I am, I'll be honest with you. I think he's just trying to give us the definition of what he thinks Formula One has become. Because he even name-checks Netflix's Drive to Survive as the thing that shows so well that off-track competition is huge. Can he does have a point in a way, because like it or not, Netflix has ensured F1's cultural survival. It's no longer your granddad's sport, which is exactly what Bernie Ecclestone wanted to keep it as, because the youngsters didn't bring any money. So this new way of thinking can only be a good thing, but Zak isn't making good use of his racer cap here because he really does have good racing knowledge. He's instead using his TV executive's cap. To him, Formula One just becomes content, heroes, villains, storylines, and you might be just thinking, hang on a minute here, you Law are part of that situation where you make Formula One content for your YouTube channel. Well, you see, the difference here is that I'm a guy on a ladder. I am a fan expressing their opinion as part of this new wave of content creators who wish to express their love for Formula One. Every single F1 YouTuber is just like that. Whereas Zak Brown, he's in charge of a Formula One team. There is a big difference here. For starters, when I hug people, I don't break their backs. I just feel like Zak is trying too hard here because he sees a Netflix camera and, just like Horner used to, waves to it like it's the main stage. And in this case, saying the Paddock soap opera is part of the engine that powers the racing series itself, that in order to be successful, you have to cause drama and undermine your rivals instead of just making the best car possible and have top-notch drivers. But again, I must point out that Zak Brown is no faker or poser. He's a guy who does know his wheel. Because just look at all of the videos on YouTube and other social media platforms where Zak is proudly showing off his car collection and really have in-depth knowledge about every single machine and every single part, their racing heritage. He really does live and breathe racing. But the Zak Brown that we see primarily is not the racer, but more like the boxer, the pugilist, the person who has to smack down their opponents to make sure that their driver and team roster reigns supreme. We're not in the days when McLaren are fighting for their lives anymore. They've made it to the top. They're one of the most profitable and richest teams in the sport. You can calm down now, Zak. And it just makes me think that we haven't really seen much about Zak due to the fact that he was probably busy talking to investors and sponsors, pleading with them to join his team. Now that he's got the most partners in Formula One in terms of teams, that is actually a verifiable fact, he's got more time on his hands to talk smack to their rivals. And I think one crowning achievement he has is that he's been able to pull a title sponsor toward McLaren for the first time since 2013 with Vodafone. Ron Dennis constantly trying and saying, don't worry, we've got a new one coming up, and it never materialized. Zak Brown can say proudly that he did what Ron didn't. Now going into 2026, the team is in rude health, having recovered from 6 years ago when they were almost on the brink of bankruptcy after the pandemic. They're right up there with Ferrari and Mercedes in terms of value, and I really don't think they're going to be going bankrupt anytime soon. And also that's the problem, and why McLaren's attitude has shifted, because as the money is piled up, the CEO's job shifts. You have to keep everything the way it is, protect the asset at all costs, even if it means you shed a few fans here or there. Having said that though, there are some real core beliefs which I do still like about McLaren, because Stella's own words via ESPN are trying to reduce the odds of a real internal conflict. In that piece I mentioned, he says that culture is not something that can be maintained with a one-man band. Yes, he's the team boss, but he does accept Zak's help, as well as help from shareholders and team owners. He does actually listen to feedback. And according to him, he and Zak still walk the factory together to build trust with one another, despite having different roles to play. But that in of itself is still a little bit of a problem, because Stella represents the new F1. Quiet competence, internal unity, performance above pageantry. Brown, though, feels like he's stuck in the old F1. You know, theatre of strategy, being loud and proud, being, as Toto Wolff described it, a bit of a dinosaur. Toto admits that, oh yeah, well, you have to admit I'm one of the longest-serving team principals in Formula One now. I'm a bit of a dinosaur. I'm from a bygone age. And Christian Horner was a bit of a dinosaur. I miss my fellow dinosaur Christian. Well, I think Zak is now trying to pretend that he is one of those figures. Toto's probably looking at Zak saying, calm down, Zak. You're really putting it on. You're really showing your corporate side. You're not a true-born dinosaur like me. I'm a Totosaurus Rex. And this kind of McLaren is not the McLaren I got on board with. I got on board with them when they were at their lowest in 2015. Just mucking in with them when times were rough, banding together. I stuck with them. And then when 2019 came along with the Andrea Stella era, I was absolutely jubilant. This team, from that to the British Grand Prix of 2023, it was a roller coaster. They made it. Through the underdog spirit, they finally made it to the top and ensured their survival. Please excuse me while I get this off my chest. Yes! Can you believe that? That was so good! That's the best weekend I've seen in years! Oh, yes! Thank you, Lando! But then Hungary 2024 proved to be a little bit of a turning point, and we realised that, yeah, McLaren have still got a lot to learn, and then when they sensed blood with Red Bull, they transformed into something which was sort of... ugh. Maybe he's being some kind of lightning rod for Andrea Stella, taking all the blows, the barbs, the hits from people like me, but the execution of it has really not been that expert, in that I feel like he is losing people, fans who will be buying their stuff, and buying tickets to see them specifically, as well as maybe spreading the awareness and goodwill of McLaren. I just feel like it's not working the way he intended it to. From where I'm sitting, what he's doing just feels like chaos and off-brand and sort of out of touch, as in, yeah, sure thing, Unk. And I can say Unk because I'm approaching 40. I am definitely Unk and I'm not ashamed of it. But nevertheless, what he's decided to do does have its potential targets. Their rivals hear something along the lines of, "We're gonna fight you and we're gonna win." In other words, if you're taking barbs at my people, I'll do the same to you. And I'm not gonna pretend it's impolite. As that's going on, the McLaren staff hear none of that, or they can just tune it out, and then just get on with what they were supposed to do, which is just go racing. As for the sponsors and investors, they're being told that they're backing a team that will defend its position off track as hard as it does on track. And with valuations and ownership scrutiny that high, Brown's main purpose here may be to tell folks who put money in them to keep the lights on that McLaren are a bunch of adults who are serious about their sport and they plan to stay that way. I understand the importance of fighting your corner and justifying your very existence, but I just feel like the tone that Zak is trying to convey has really not landed the way it intended to. In that him admitting that politics is a thing and destabilizing other teams is some kind of a virtue to be proud of, it should be along the lines of something, hey, it's not pretty, I don't really like to, but to ensure my very survival, I have to just hit like everyone else. And he even nods at Horner, painting him as the bad guy. He was taking pot shots at this guy, saying that he shouldn't be in Formula One. And then when eventually he does go, he's saying, "Oh, it's a shame he's not here anymore. You know, we had our moments and he was the villain. You know, Formula One was kind of good." In that light, this is where the idea that McLaren's desire to have a cleaner image than the dastardly Red Bull starts to get a little bit hazy. Is this the kind of team you'd want your children following since, well, F1's clearly pushing towards younger audiences? You see, it's just all confusing, because Stella's worldview is about cohesion and humility, whereas Brown's worldview is about causing conflict and using it as fuel and bait. That difference can coexist as long as the organisation is able to draw a line in the sand and keep things separate. There can be a way of destabilising your rivals which is reasonable, and that is, of course, by hiring the best people. One recent example is them pinching Will Courtney from Red Bull to become their brand new sporting director. That's a good example. Then of course there's winning over new sponsors, taking them from your competition. The MasterCard bid was a nice little bit of an example of that, because other teams were being attributed to the likes of that card company, and McLaren were able to secure the bag. That is a good example. You also find good examples by pushing back loopholes, finding innovations of your own. You know, doing what it takes to make the best Formula One car and secure your financial future. Those are good examples of destabilizing, because you're taking away things that other teams were trying to take for themselves. But there is also a version of destabilizing that can look really, really toxic and can go bad if it really gets out of hand or is not used properly. And I feel like we're steering towards that version, such as going through personal smear campaigns like with Max Verstappen, then retracting them, realizing that it wasn't down with the focus group. Christian Horner for the last couple of years. Then, of course, there was Nico Hülkenberg after the Austin sprint crash, and then he had to eventually apologise. But with McLaren being at the top of their game and Zak carrying a huge voice in Formula One, the damage was done. Many of us just thinking, Nico, how could you? Instead, Zak is currently using every single thing that goes on in the paddock and turning it into a courtroom drama, which is kind of funny given what's happened with Alex Palou. And thusly, it just makes me think that what Zak Brown is doing is performative, not persuasive, as in, I am not convinced that Zak is right here. I just look at Zak and go, geez, man, calm down. Because McLaren are champions, they don't need to punch down anymore. All they gotta do is just keep on winning, and the paddock will get the point. You are winning, you are great, you are the best, because you're scoring the most points and bagging the most wins and collecting trophies. So all that Zak is doing right now, thinking that it's still 2019, is just making them look more insecure, McLaren, rather than being brave, because this aggressive streak, it's just not a good look anymore. Because we praised that aggression while they were on the up and up because it looked plucky, that they were punching above their weight, that they were climbing back to the top, and now they're back at the top, we're judging them for it. I know that may seem a little bit unfair or misproportionate, but the fact is, though, is that they are the best. We don't need to be reminded of that. We get it. But there is a little bit of a twist to this particular foam of thought I want to share with you. The rules reset does sort of turn everybody into underdogs at the same time, unless you're Mercedes, based on the consensus at the time of writing. And this is where Stella's philosophy to start like you lost comes into play. That mindset can create an odd public effect, that the team wins like a giant and talks like a hunted animal. But Zak just completely treads all over that and means it just ends up in some kind of weird nest. But okay, I want to bring Williams into the equation for the moment, as well as Audi actually. And the idea that the old Piranha Club idea I brought up earlier is becoming a bit of an outdated way of thinking. All of course aided by the arrival of more and more team principals who have an engineering background. Look at what's happened with Haas, for example. IO has been a transformative factor for that team, as in people are interested and are supportive of them, and they've bagged Toyota. Their kind of politics is different. It's more diplomatic, but maybe just as effective on the track and off the track in actually buying goodwill from fans, allowing racers to race and that being the star attraction. Audi's public messaging so far has been about being controlled and brand first. F1's own website describes how they've researched how colours will look on TV, and their team boss Jonathan Wheatley is all about creating an identity that people will recognise for years to come. Now that is politics, but it's not the shouty kind that Brown likes to telegraph. It's clean, it's logical, it's admittedly dull. So with what Audi's saying, I nod my head and accept it. I go, okay, fair enough. Then of course there's Williams under vowels. He's a lot more measured in tone and long-term oriented. Especially true when many consider that Williams' car for next year will start off the most developed of the entire grid since they started so early. Whether or not they can maintain that head start is for the season itself. Reuters has James talking about resisting short-term traps and investing in the future. That does look apolitical and thinking about self-preservation, but it is still political. But what it is non-confrontational, as in James is not going to resort to lashing out at other teams. Instead, he's taking all of that energy and putting his dorkish mathematic ways into making the car and team operate better. And it really helps him that he has drivers in Carlos and Alex who are also very apolitical, as in they don't want to start drama because they learnt for themselves in the Horner and Marco era of Red Bull. They don't want to employ that over at Williams. But nevertheless, them choosing not to be political is still political. It's a decision that they and Doralton Capital, their investors, chose to make, and so far, it's been an absolute banger. All in the attempt to generate credibility, which I think it actually has, because I think the majority of Formula One fans are pleading and begging the gods up there that Williams has another good season. And we can even bring Red Bull into this in them changing their stance regarding politics, because yes, you might be thinking with Lauren Mekies, another engineer on board, that they will be wishing to choose to eschew politics forever. Well, that would be a bit of a naive way of thinking. They are still using politics, Red Bull, but they're just choosing to follow the crowd and be a little bit more shrewd and discreet about it. They can still go for your jugular, but they'll be nice to you about it. Sky Sports quotes Mekki saying that Red Bull will continue to push the rules to the limit and sometimes beyond. That is still, say it with me, politics, but expressed with technical aggression and a smile. Much more cheeky and subtle than Horner would do, taking swipes overtly, which is exactly what Zak Brown is doing. So it is safe to say, people, that F1 politics has not gone away. It's just put on a better disguise so it's less obvious to see. It's classier now. They're doing so in a way which looks more technical, logical, professional, and diplomatic, because, quite frankly, they don't need to worry about that sort of stuff anymore, taking potshots at their rivals, because, well, Netflix and Drive to Survive can do it for them. All they gotta do is just do their job, and the editors and the producers over at that show will just do the rest. And also, this is the right time to do it because the sport is bigger than ever, therefore it's going to generate more scrutiny, and also the sponsors who are coming on board for the first time will be a little bit more sensitive, not fully aware about the Piranha Club and its full effects. As in, if they see an example of this, they might go, oh, is that really in step with what we're trying to do here? I reckon the old school feuds, which are loud and proud and blustering, they still take place, but we don't get to see them. It's all done behind closed doors so as to avoid a controversy that may upset a sponsor. A CEO who wants McLaren to look premium within the mainstream can't keep on sounding like a chaos merchant forever. because his words risk dragging McLaren into the entertainment framing of conflict as a feature, right when McLaren are trying to look like the grown-ups and the champions for maybe years to come. And it doesn't really help that their main man Lando Norris wants to win titles fairly without looking like a ruthless killer. Him defying convention, whereas his team is looking to follow said convention. But maybe Zak is trying to use us all as a widespread focus group or something, see how we react to this and then go from there, trying to figure out how McLaren conveys itself in 2026. And maybe one way is that if he believes the paddock and the crowds and the fans are a rumour-driven pressure cooker, one way to diffuse all of that is just to confoam that foam of thought. Just say that everyone does it. Which means that when people like me and others just scream to McLaren saying, "You're being too political," Zak Brown can clap back and say, "Yeah, you're right. Welcome to Formula One, buddy. That's just how we roll." So if Brown believes that attention is currency, then what he's doing right here is to try and buy every single nickel and dime of that particular movement and control the narrative from there. Trying to be an effective figurehead and attract attention away from what the actual F1 team is doing and just take all the slings and arrows because he's got the time and capacity to do so, as well as the time in Formula One. Because he's been around the sport for a decade now, he has earned his stripes. But at the same time, it's just not really coming off, I think, the way he wants it to. It's just not appealing to me. And does it mean that Stella's just a hostage to his chaos theory? I doubt it, because Stella's explicitly linked that culture to alignment with Brown and the shareholders. The more plausible read is that maybe he and Brown are running a two-channel system. But the risk is pretty obvious. If Brown overplays this, which I think he is doing, he will become the McLaren brand instead of Stella and what he's doing. Casual fans may wind up looking at McLaren and just think, wow, they like to talk a lot, don't they? They're just a bunch of hot air. They're doing all of that whilst all of the other teams are just getting on with building racing cars and going racing and allowing their drivers to rule the show, be it on the track or doing it through funny social media videos. This doesn't really feel in step with what F1's trying to do with all of the other teams and parties. What makes you so sure that your plan will work? And it will result in neutrals just interpreting every little thing that goes on track, which is exactly what happened from Monza 2025 onwards. We spent the last third of the season just looking at every single race that McLaren did and demanding them, you better not pull any funny stunts there, matey. And this is where I want to drop a bit of an uncomfortable thought, that even though it might not be a popular way of thinking, reputation is a performance metric within Formula One. There, I said it. Brown's quote admits that directly by putting drivers, sponsors, and employees in the same competitive bucket. You therefore can't separate clean racing from clean narrative anymore because the sports ecosystem won't allow you to do so. Yes, politics does wind up being inevitable, but celebrating it as a means of entertainment, yeah, that isn't inevitable. McLaren have the chance to prove that you can be ruthless in execution without being addicted to destabilising theatre, which is becoming more and more fuddy-duddy. And I feel like Stella doesn't want to follow that school of thought anymore and instead wants to follow what everyone else is doing, but Brown just can't think that way. Stella's poison biscuits, it's meant to sound quite mature and logical, albeit quite defensive, but then Brown takes those words, mangles them up with his PR speak, and then lashes it out in a way of saying, "Oh, well, you try and make us look bad, well, we'll take your words and then aim them right back at you, have that!" But champions like McLaren, they don't need to do that anymore. They don't need to play mind games. They just need to win and then everyone gets it. They don't need to sound like underdogs anymore. What McLaren needs is a Toto. Someone who fights when needed, but knows when silence speaks louder, because we all saw that for ourselves with the George Russell contract saga. But Zak? He's performing for the stage. Put simply, the McLaren of now is not the McLaren that I remember joining in 2015, so it's just not a team I can root for anymore. So, bobble-hatted bias, your services are no longer required, so yeah, it's time for you to retire, mate. If you're still with me, thank you. I do have more to say, and you can find it in this video right here, which I think you will love. I'll see you over there.